Today on Clergy Corner, we are going to discuss freedom of expression and religious sensitivity. Can the two live together? Please join us in 30 seconds for our lively discussion on the topic. What do you think, Sue?
Absolutely.
Good day, Livingston, and welcome to Clergy Corner. I am Dan Martian, pastor at the Presbyterian Church of Livingston and your host. Please welcome to our show Reverend Dr. Richard Vossler from the Grace Lutheran Church, Rabbi Faith Joy Dantowitz from B'nai Abraham, Temple B'nai Abraham, and Dr. Ali Chaudhry, president at the Center for Understanding Islam and also the Islamic Society of Basking Ridge, and Monsignor Robert Furman from St. Philomena Roman Catholic Church. Friends, thank you so much for being with us. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the freedom of expression as dealing with religion and religion leaders or religious leaders. You know, there's been a lot of jokes, there's been cartoons, especially recently with the Islamic depiction of Muhammad. And I know that over the course of time, we religious leaders, we kind of are sensitive to that when there are jokes, arts, things like that. What's the balance between religious expression and also freedom of expression? So this is what we're going to be talking about on the show today. Is there a balance? Like I was mentioning at the promo, can we live and can the two live together? So Faith Joy, I'm going to ask you the first question about freedom of expression versus religious sensitivity. What does it mean to you?
Well, I think that it's important that there is freedom of expression, and I certainly believe that we have a right and the ability to express ourselves how we choose to, but there's this balance, and it's not okay, just like it's not okay to say fire in a crowded room, it's not okay to incite violence or to incite violence. So with the recent situation going on in France, and the cartoons, the negative cartoons about Muhammad, the really violent, awful cartoons, there's a balance there because they're also making cartoons that make fun of other religions. So I think that I don't look at these cartoons, I'm not excited about these cartoons, but I don't think it's just picking on one religion and saying, let's do something violent against this religion. So I'm really curious to hear what other panelists have to say about it, but I believe in freedom of expression. So
Ali, what do you think?
Of course, assalamu alaikum to begin with. Peace be with all of you. Of course, freedom of expression is a God-given gift because that's one unique attribute that human beings have that other creatures of God do not. Mm-hmm. So therefore, freedom of expression is something that we are endowed with for the purpose of communicating. However, when it comes to using religious figures to ridicule the faith, or its leaders, purposely, it is something that you cross the line. So I believe that everybody has the right to say what they wish to say, but if they intend to denigrate your faith, then I think there should be some guidelines for showing respect for people. Right. In fact, I'd like to come back to it to talk about what those guidelines mean, even in the life of Prophet Muhammad, right. As to how you would react. But the point is, the expression is something that's valued and must be respected. However, people who are using their right to express whatever views they have ought to keep in mind that the people who are going to be offended may react differently.
But where is
how
the
you
fine
react
line
is
there?
something that we have to draw the line.
But where is that fine line? Because I think throughout history, people have always either made fun or poked fun at and innocently too,
Right.
with religious, with expression and the freedom of expression.
Correct.
Where is that fine line when they cross over? Especially living in a free democracy
so let me-
where the freedom of expression
Sure.
is open. Let's get Father
Yes.
Monsignor Furman involved here.
I think most intelligent people can accept innocent prodding, kidding. I think, though, that what we witnessed in Paris was not innocent. The cartoons were deliberately offensive. It's often been said that this is a satirical magazine. Well, that's not my definition of satire. That is obscenity. A deliberate insult, not only to Islam, but to Christianity, all religions, I'm sure, just from the sampling that I was able to view. So I think a faith has the obligation to itself and to God to say, we reject this. Not by killing you, but by rejecting it outright and condemning it in defense of what is sacred. As in a personal life, a level of maturity and respect, or let's say respect for the other, is a sign of maturity. Collectively, I think in society, a respectful media is a sign of a mature society, and sadly, most societies, I think, are lacking.
Is there a balance between the both? Rick, what do you think about that?
Yes, there is. The problem comes, I think everyone is in favor of freedom of expression. Where it gets to be dicey is when that freedom of expression is expressed against your particular your faith. It's where you see it the most, or it's where you experience it the most. It may very well be even with all of them, but you certainly feel it more when that freedom has been expressed against you. And it's at that time that you look at the other instances and you see that, hey, it seems at least that it is more against me than it is against the others. So you almost have to take an outside source, outside source to take a look and see, how much is that against you? But I mean, that's where I think we've kind of agreed that there is a balance. Yes, we do have freedom of expression, but it's not the denigrating. It's not the the line of denigrating someone else as opposed to your own, or denigrating someone else.
So the thing is about the expression, what I think is maybe denigrating to someone else might not be the same definition for other people. And they'll say, no, I didn't denigrate, and it was just out of fun, and it was just maybe making a point. So I have the expression to do that.
So let me add
that's
something
good.
to that, because
Sure.
I think in the case of Islam, the prohibition against drawing pictures of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is based on the teaching that there is only one God, and only God is worthy of worship. No one else should be raised to a level of anything that is worthy of worship. And that is why Prophet Muhammad never wanted people to come to his grave, for example, and worship or anything like that. So in Islam, it is much more sensitive in that sense, because people are saying we're not even allowed to think in terms of a picture of the Prophet and trying to conceive what he looks like and so forth. However, the reaction to it that we have seen, obviously, is absolutely against the teaching of Islam as a religion. But more specifically, it is so much contrary to what Prophet Muhammad would have done. And later on, as we talk about reactions,
Right.
I have 2 or 3 examples from his life to show what would he do if he was insulted.
So what's going on in Paris and also the Danish, because this happened I believe about 15 years ago in the Netherlands or
In
Holland,
Denmark,
or
yeah.
Denmark.
Yes.
The reaction was very, very extreme.
Right.
Now that's just not mainstream Islam, is it?
Well, there are 2 reasons. That's the teaching of Islam. And as I said, the main reaction that you got was from the people who went into the streets, generally speaking, uneducated people in Pakistan, in Somalia, and other places where some violence took place. But you didn't see highly educated people going and doing that in the streets or destroying property, because it is strictly against the teaching of the Prophet. And let me share a couple of examples with you. There's a well-known story about a woman in Mecca when Prophet was preaching his message of one God. All he was saying was, don't worship these idols, just worship one God. And that is what you should do. And do good deeds and so forth. And so this woman didn't like that at all. So she would throw garbage in his way as he would be walking to the mosque. Every day she would throw the word. One day, there was no garbage. So he went to the mosque and he asked his companions, do you know anything about this lady? And they said, nothing, we haven't heard anything. So on his way back, he goes and knocks on her door. And she comes out. So she is absolutely stunned to see him standing there. Okay? And she said, well, I just wanted to know how you were, that you were okay. Because he was worried that something may have happened to her. And the story is that as a result of that, then she accepts Islam. So here was someone who was absolutely hateful toward the Prophet, but because of his action, she saw that. There's another story that's actually told in the Quran, very basic. And that says that there's a town called Taif near Mecca. When Prophet went there to preach the same message to them of oneness of God, those people were so much against him that they told their children to go out and stone the Prophet. And they stoned him so much, they abused him, and he was bleeding, with blood in his shoes, we are told in the stories. And the angel comes to him. And the angel says, would you like me to ask God to crush these people in between these two mountains because they have disobeyed you and they have dedicated? And he pauses. And he said, no. Maybe in the future, their children or the children of their children will believe. And he went back. The third example I like to give is when Prophet was in the most powerful position, having migrated originally to Medina, and he comes back to Mecca. And Mecca is now basically in his hands. Everybody in the community is gathered in the Kaaba, which is the place of worship where everybody used to come. And everybody is now worried as to what is he going to do. These are the enemies of the Prophet who fought him for his entire life. And they were ready to kill him. They actually had a plot to kill him. But he escaped. So he stands up and he says to all of them, what do you think I'm going to do? And they began to say to him, oh, you are our nephew, you are trustworthy, because he had this characteristic of being very faithful and very honest and well-spoken, always told the truth, and you are our nephew, right? So they're trying to appeal to him. So he says to them, you are all pardoned and go your way. At that point, he had the opportunity, according to the local custom, to do whatever he wanted to do with those people and punish them. He did not. So there are several other examples of these three sort of tell you that Prophet Muhammad would not react to that.
So he wouldn't. So you're saying he wouldn't react. So if
Absolutely,
the Prophet Muhammad were responding to what happened in Paris, he would just say.
I would even give you an example. There's a man who comes to the mosque and he grabs him by his collar, and he says, "Why haven't you paid your debt? Your people haven't paid my debts," even though they were not due at the time. And there were his companions who were around him got very angry. They were wanting to grab this guy and kill him. And he said, no, don't stop. If you want to help, just go and pay his debts. He's got one of his companions, Omar, to go and actually, he paid him 3 times the amount the guy was owed. And, that was, so his example was always, be respectful of human life. Do not go out and destroy property. And you certainly have to give people a chance to understand the message.
So I'm just trying to understand, to bring it back to today, to what's happened today, whereas you said, I think if I heard you correctly in the beginning, you said that there's still things that are so offensive that shouldn't be done, yet Muhammad would be okay with it
Absolutely. being done? In fact, that's what people like me and others in my position
try to channel that.
That's what we are trying to tell our own communities and outside, that is not what Prophet Muhammad. That's why this op-ed that I shared with you, and I have it available for anyone to share it on their websites, that actually talks about what would Muhammad do in these circumstances. And I gave you those examples.
Yeah, it's almost like, in the Christian sense, it's like, what would Jesus do? And then in Jewish sense, maybe what would, the rabbi do, or Moses do, or whatever. And it seems like it's such a powder keg.
Right.
And I was thinking, in Christianity and Judaism, we don't get really maybe bent out of joint as the Muslims do, as far as Muhammad. Where, you know, 'cause we talked about education and educating. Are we apathetic to when our religious leaders are being, you know, picked on and made poked
We
and
don't
fun of?
we don't have a picture of. We're not drawing a picture of God. So you have a picture of Muhammad that you'd be drawing, right? So you're saying a cartoon of Muhammad. We wouldn't have a cartoon of God per se to draw. But
But I've seen rabbis even writing the word God but missing the O in it. You know,
Yes,
they only write
yes,
the
I know. It's
GD
a
with
fence
a
around
dash
the
in
law,
it.
and it's not got its actual
around that,
name. I
yes,
know.
Right.
But I was thinking too, we could expand the conversation by thinking about other expressions of art that have been questionable. So there was the recent opera in New York City, Death of Klinghoffer, where there were a lot of people protesting that, saying, how could you have an opera about the death of Leon Klinghoffer, who was thrown off the ship, and because he was Jewish, was that okay or not okay? And what about the Book of Mormon, this musical on Broadway, which, you know, I had a great time laughing there, but how offensive is it if you're a Mormon person? Are you going to see it and laugh at the show, or are you going to be too offended to go see the show? I haven't asked a Mormon friend that question, so I just wondering like how we add all of that to the mix here.
Right. Or, you know, when they make fun of Jesus on South Park.
That's right.
Right.
You know,
The
the influence and power of the media is striking, and it's far-reaching. And I think this whole experience of the Paris situation has brought that yet again to light. The insults to the Lord Jesus are constant and offensive.
And what we do in the church.
But yet he himself
and
said, you know, be good to your enemy and pray for your persecutors. So people have in fact set themselves up as persecutors of the church, persecutors of Judaism, persecutors of Islam.
Right.
It's essential that we be peacemakers, not just tolerators of this.
Absolutely.
I think.
Well, how do we do that?
Yeah,
Bob, how do you think we do that?
Preaching the right way, teaching the right things, and putting into practice what we've been taught. Now that's an abstraction, but that's the answer, I think.
Right.
I think we have to be who we are.
Is it something that we can do together? We can combine together as all the religions, just not the ones that are presented here on the panel, but you got Buddhism, you got Hinduism, you got Baha'i,
Sikhism.
you know, and you got all these together, and it seems like a lot of times we're silo and we want to do our own thing and preach our own way, but when it comes to things like this, is it possible to come together and support one another? Because when one part of the body suffers, you know, we're all suffering, and we've all suffered from being poked fun at.
I believe it is certainly possible, and I'd make 2 points. First is that we need to educate ourselves about each other's faiths, in part of all of this interfaith effort that we are undertaking. And one of the tests that I use for the success of that core teaching, if you will be a day when we see Muslims sitting together around the table and they hear someone say something horrible or hateful about a Jew. And some Muslim at that table will stand up and say, no, that's not right. And the day that when a group of Jews sitting together or Christians sitting together hear something against Muslims and say that it's unacceptable. Second thing that I would do is that we need to learn enough about each other so that we have confidence that we can actually stand up for the other. And that's one of the projects that we've undertaken at the Islamic Society of Asking Ridge. Over the last 2 years, we have formed a committee called the New Jersey Muslim Jewish Solidarity Committee. In fact, we are having our next meeting on March 1st at the Islamic Society on that very topic, where we are saying to each other that we need to be able to learn about each other enough so that we have the confidence to be able to speak up when something happens. So if there's an incident at a Jewish cemetery or at a synagogue, then Muslims should be able to stand up there and support them. And similarly, if it happens to a Muslim center of house of worship, then Jews should do that. And actually there was a perfect example in Rockaway, New Jersey, where there was a swastika painted on the door of a mosque in Rockaway. And the Jewish rabbis and Christian priests all came at the mosque to give a press conference to speak about that. So that's what we are really working on right now, trying to build that, enough confidence in each other that we can actually do that.
Yeah, and I think here in Livingston, going on, you're talking about the education, and where that happens, where the leaders of the various houses of worship come together on a monthly basis, and at that time, talk about their faith, talk about what it is about their faith that makes them unique. And as they do that, then the leaders can get back to the folks within their congregation,
Yes.
and share that message with the folks within the congregation.
Sure.
I mean, there was a time several years ago where that's where we went. We went from the different houses of worship within town,
Exactly.
and each one talked about their own religion.
I think education is powerful.
Absolutely.
Learning,
Yes.
Otherwise, if you're just strangers, then we shouldn't fear the stranger, but often people do. So when we get to know one another,
And frankly,
as
one
human
other thing
beings,
that I would
speak
add is
out.
that if you really are interested in learning about another faith, find a friend of that faith.
Right.
Find someone and become as a friend. Get to know them as individual human beings. Because once you do that, all of these stereotypical images that people have built would just disappear. That's been my experience, and that's what I've been trying to work with all the communities that we are a part of. And I think
You've been
that's
working with
essential.
communities, Ali, about moving ahead, moving forward with
Right.
the sensitivities and understanding and sharing with one another. What has been probably the hiccup or the most challenging thing trying to get the folks to come together and talk?
Well, sometimes it is international events, which is unfortunate, things like in Paris, or things like horrible things that ISIS is doing. And the problem is that people conflate the actions of those few criminals with the whole
religion.
Muslim community. And worse yet, with the faith of Islam. So that's what we need to understand. And I think as clergy leaders, we have to sort of work with our congregation and say, understand the facts, okay, and isolate them and understand what they in the proper context, but don't conflate them with the faith itself.
And I think that's where it's really important to have religious leaders speaking out and having
Yes.
their voices heard that are not the extremists, but that are the moderates, the ones
Right.
that are promoting peace. And I think that's what people feel they're not hearing enough of, to say, like, where is that voice of reason, like we hear right now, to say, speaking out on behalf of peaceful Islam.
You will be
So I think
pleasantly
that's-
surprised to find that those voices are there, have been speaking, just like
They
I am
are
speaking
speaking,
here.
but I think we need to
many
it's
others.
amplify. We need
I
to
would agree,
amplify.
Rabbi. I think I would love to have heard more people say those words.
Exactly. So my point is that those are being said by Muslim leaders all over the world. All major organizations have issued statements of condemnation of these kinds of actions when they occur. The question is, how would you hear about it?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Doesn't
How to
reach
hear,
you.
and
that's
even in Paris, where
I know.
everybody rallied around the Charlie Hebdo, that there were also
And there were
all those
Muslims
there were all
there.
those Jews that were killed too. with all the anti-Semitic acts that went on with the Jews that were murdered
Right.
in the kosher butchery that wasn't really brought out as much.
Or
as,
at the same time, the killing in Nigeria of a couple thousand.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And
Christ,
there wasn't the Christians there, and nothing was said. The problem is what you were saying. Why don't you're saying that, but how people aren't hearing that?
Well,
That doesn't sell newspapers.
I know that's the problem. In fact, I teach a course at Rutgers University as a part of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. It's a 10-week-long course on Islam. And one year, I was constantly hearing this complaint from people: how come we don't hear Muslims, speaking up on these things? So I did a survey. I gave them a questionnaire. I said, "You, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, living in Livingston, New Jersey, how would you hear about a statement issued by an Islamic scholar or an Islamic organization? How would you actually know about that? Would you read it in your weekly newspaper? Probably not. Would it be on your local TV channel? Probably not. Right?
why not?
Okay. No, but the point is that the question is, how would you know it? How would you actually know that this is actually happening and so forth? And the point of it, they all came back and said the only way we would hear it is if it was on CNN. In other words, there was a wide publicity of a statement being made and so forth. So let me share one particular source which I rely on very much. There are many organizations that do this. There's a magazine called online magazine called the American Muslim.
Okay.
Just theamericanmuslim.org. Okay, and there's a lady by the name of Sheila Masaji. She and her son have done a meticulous job of cataloging all the statements that have been made. Links to the full statements of everything you want, on all of the events. Okay? So if you ever have any doubts, go to that website and you will find it. Okay, if you want the current news, CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, issues these press releases. Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Islamic Society of North America, which is one of in fact, the largest Muslim organization.
So we have
in the
these,
United States.
we have these links,
So
we
they're
have these
putting these things
websites.
up, but they don't get carried
Yeah.
on
That's
CNN.
it. Well,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
it's
We
not
have
So
these
help us get
websites.
it on CNN.
But,
I don't want
but
that
we got
CNN.
conservative people that hear only what they want to hear.
Yeah, right.
And
You know-
CNN doesn't accurately report a lot of things either. So
Well,
I
a
wouldn't
lot of the
just
news
rely on
networks
CNN.
don't.
No, a lot of them
Yeah.
don't.
You know,
Right,
most of them
right.
don't. They have a slant.
Yeah.
All
All
news
do,
networks
all
all have a
do.
slant.
Yeah.
But the ones that I've run into, a lot of times, they have blinders on their ears, or they have covered their ears and cover their eyes because they come out. They only listen to the conservatives because they're conservative.
Right.
You know, and they listen. Well, this is the Muslim or Jewish or Christian. This is the way they, this is the way they believe.
Yeah.
And and we run across this all the time. How do we, as clergy, leaders within our community, help people to start taking off the earmuffs so that they are going to be able to hear our message? Rick.
Well, again, it's through the education. I mean, I have to say, you said that the conservatives only listen to that, but the other way it goes too is that the liberals will only listen to the liberals as well. So it's upon us to encourage our folks to listen to the both sides, listen to the one you were giving, but listen to both sides, whether it's CNN or Fox News or stuff like that, to get the full scope of what you hear.
Right, and then
what's
put it
there.
on, and then put it on the table
that
so
out.
that we can
Yeah.
go ahead
Yeah.
and sift out and then find the truth. Because I believe that the truth comes from many different voices, and then the truth is God's truth. But we need those voices so that we can hear the voice of God.
Yeah. If I may just add one other
Sure.
element. There is certainly in the case of Islam, there is a huge, well-funded industry of so-called terrorism experts. And recently there have been articles about these fake terrorism experts as to who they are, what do they represent, and who are they funded by. The Southern Poverty Law Center did a study, and they published a booklet called Fear, Inc. These people are in the business of producing fear and using fear to suit their own political agenda and go out and become the well-known expert. They're the only ones who get invited to Fox News to come and speak about Islam.
So we only have about a minute left.
Yeah.
What is the danger for all of us in the religious circles on what is going on? What do you think the danger is for all of us?
I would say the danger would be if we stay silent and don't
Yeah.
say anything.
Yeah.
That is the worst thing we can do. So we should be speaking out, not only within our own communities, but to others.
Staying silent, but it's also listening only to one side, or which either side it is.
Acting and speaking out of emotion rather than
There you go.
intellect. Yeah.
And I would just add that I think I was most gratified when I hear Pope Francis
Yeah.
on his foreign trip
The pontifice. Yeah.
came out and said, this is not, you have freedom of expression, but there is a limit.
Okay.
Well,
well,
just
to
because you
respect.
can do something doesn't mean you should
Yeah.
do something, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
you don't
thank
have to
you.
buy their
Thank
magazine.
you.
That's right,
after
yeah.
this- yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today on the show. I appreciate the insights and the thoughtful conversation we had. It's a start. It's a start to educate. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for being with us at home and in our studio audience. Until we meet again, may God's love be with you.